We're going to get started in just a minute. If you cannot hear me, please let me know. Good morning. Hopefully, everyone can hear me okay. My name is Jackie Abram. I am the international best-selling and award-winning author of Hush Money: How One Woman Proved Systemic Racism in Her Workplace and Kept Her Job. And I want to thank everyone for showing up here today to not only support me and the work I do every Saturday morning, but for our very special guests. So today, this event is called 514, The Day the Devil Came to Buffalo. And we have a guest that is absolutely near and dear to my heart. So I'm excited to bring Mark Talley on. But before we do that, I just want to give you a little bit of background information in terms of who I am, the work that I do. And then I also want to let you know how Mark and I came to know each other, how our paths crossed. So I'm going to share my screen and share just a little bit about me. The boss is derailing your career, setting you up to fail, or sabotaging your work efforts, call Jackie Abram, the Employees Workplace Discrimination Consultant. Jackie Abram is the international best-selling and award-winning author of Hush Money: How One Woman Proved Systemic Racism in Her Workplace and Kept Her Job. She understands firsthand how devastating workplace discrimination can be to your life and career. Using the strategies in her #1 Amazon best-selling book, she's taken down more than a half a dozen toxic employers and never walked away from a single job empty-handed. Jackie is featured in Forbes, ABC News, and on Spectrum News, among others. Through a wide range of services, she helps employees in toxic workplaces fight back to get the outcomes they so richly deserve. So stop suffering in silence and leaving your career to chance. Whether you want to fight back without an attorney to improve your chances of success or increase your chances of getting an attorney interested in taking your case, call Jackie Abram, the Employees Workplace Discrimination Consultant. We are ready and able to help you. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea about me and the work that I am doing since I found myself on this path. And so now, what I would like to do is tell you a little bit about Mark Talley and how our paths crossed. So, if you bear with me for just a moment, I'm going to actually play an interview. On May 14th, nothing I was expecting to happen occurred.
Mark Talley never thought he'd write a book.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the executive director and founder of Agents for Advocacy.
Or hold a press conference as one of the faces of a movement to fight racism and inequality.
At 2:25 p.m., 5 minutes before my shift was scheduled to end, everyone around me instantly became glued to their cell phones simultaneously.
But here we are.
I wasn't concerned about anyone in my family being in the vicinity of an active shooter because there were plenty of shootings in Buffalo over the past few years, and they really never impacted anyone I knew or loved.
Almost a year later.
The pain was and still to this day unbearable. I find myself numb to emotions because I know my body isn't strong enough to bear it.
So Mark Talley enlisted some help.
I hear you're coming to Buffalo. That was the message that he sent to me on LinkedIn. And I said, yes, I am.
Jackie Abrams has a pair of books directly tackling racism in corporate America. And now, more than just family ties her to the city of good neighbors.
I literally froze as I'm staring at his message to me. And I said, yes, and you are going to help them heal. And through your experiences, you are going to find that the more you talk about it and the more you release it into this book, you are going to heal because it's surprisingly therapeutic.
Helping more than she originally intended.
Okay, let's do it. And I said, let's, as in we?
Because Mark Talley never thought he'd write a book.
Writing was never something I considered, but neither was community engagement and advocacy, but heavy is the head that wears the crown, and sometimes you don't choose the life, but the life chooses you.
One that will go past just knowing what happened on May 14th, 2022.
It was very painful at times. There were times I couldn't survive the sadness, because when you take on that kind of responsibility, you have to immerse yourself into their experience.
A few minutes later, my relief arrived, my shift finally ended, and I couldn't wait to leave the hospital.
What was he dealing with when he realized that his mother was there, And then afterwards, how is he processing that? And so by the time you come out of his journey, you are no longer numb to the pain. And it makes you want to do more than just offer your thoughts and prayers the next time one happens.
Although I wasn't looking forward to telling my mother the unfortunate news me and Ross had for her, I was definitely looking forward to seeing her.
In Buffalo, Kevin Hayes.
If only I had known, unfortunately, I would never be seeing her again.
Spectrum News.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to bring Mark on. Good morning, Mark.
Oh, good morning, Jackie.
How are you today?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm looking for confirmation that folks on both LinkedIn and YouTube can hear us. I'm a little concerned because I'm looking at my phone and I'm not showing that this is actually broadcasting. So let me just make sure. Okay, perfect. I was getting a little worried, so I'm glad that I can see that it's gone through. And so let's go ahead and continue. I was a little worried because I'm not as technology savvy as I like to think I am. And since the day that I started doing these live events, Mark, you know that I had a phobia. Live events, and I found myself having to do more of them just because my voice was being silenced on so many platforms, and I'm always a little nervous about when I go live. And so Delilah is sitting in the background. She's letting me know she hears us. Thomas, thank you. Thomas is joining us from Baltimore. He's letting me know he can hear. So Mark, now that I know everybody is hearing us, audio and video is good, I want to welcome you to this Saturday show. And I want to just ask you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself and, just what brought you here today.
All right, absolutely. My name is Mark Talley. I'm an executive director and founder of my nonprofit organization, Agents for Advocacy, in which our primary mission and vision is to bring awareness to systemic racism and socioeconomic inequality so we can foster a reality in which one's environment, one's race doesn't dictate one's future. So we like to have a lot of socioeconomic events here in the city relating to income inequality, food equity, business acumen, environmental awareness. Even today, we have an event which will be giving close to maybe 200 turkeys away on the west side here in Buffalo.
That's awesome. And, Mark knows me very well. He knows that, when I get immersed in these events that I can talk forever. So he made me promise him that we would keep this to 1 hour because he does have an event following it. So Mark has offered to read part of his book. Mark, I believe that you've selected chapters 2 and 3 to read today.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Excellent. And then Mark has also given me the honor of reading the preface to his book. So, as you know, by the interview that I played for you, Mark and I did several interviews. We were on ABC News in Buffalo. We were on Spectrum News. We were in the various newspapers. I mean, we did a lot of work together. And, I really never expected to be on this path with Mark. I was flabbergasted when he reached out to me on LinkedIn after reading Hush Money, and he said he was going through some things, and he didn't want all of the anger and the darkness that he was feeling after this just enormous tragedy happened to cause him to go out and do something he would regret later. And that resonated with him in my story because for anybody who's read my Hush Money books, you know that I was in a very dark place when I wrote them. And so they were written raw, we're not polished, seasoned writers. And that actually appealed to Mark. He could tell that there were real people behind my books and the rawness and the way that it was written. He said he needed that with his book. And so he asked me to work with him, and I was just beyond honored. So, Mark, I want to thank you for allowing me to read your introduction. It's just so powerful. The story is powerful. Our audience is going to be captivated by your experiences, what you went through. And while there are parts of this tragedy that are absolutely horrifying and disheartening, what you were able to do with everything, it ended up being heartening. And so it was just such a powerful journey for me to be on with you. And it was just, like I said, mind-blowing for me. And so with that being said, Mark, with your permission, I'm going to go ahead and open up the manuscript, and we're going to read the introduction, and then I'm going to go off camera and let you read your chapters, okay?
All right, let's get started.
All right, sounds good. And Delilah, you're in the background monitoring the chats. For some reason, the chats are not coming through for me here on Restream, so I'll definitely go back and look at those a little bit later. All right, so we're going to get to the preface in 514, the day the devil came to Buffalo. And so the preface is called Hey Mama by Kanye West. My name is Mark Talley, and I'm 33 years old. Despite going to a Catholic high school and having somewhat of a Baptist upbringing, I've never been an overly religious kind of guy, never gave much thought to the concepts of good and evil. But something happened, something that shook me to my core, something that convinced me that the devil is real. The date was May 14th, 2022, a day that will go down in history as the day the devil disguised as a racist asshole with hate in his heart and a semi-automatic rifle, came to the east side of Buffalo and killed 10 innocent Black people at Tops Friendly Market. Geraldine Talley, my 62-year-old mother, was one of them. She was the last person he killed with 2 shots to the head before police calmly arrested him. I guess I can find a little solace in the fact that they didn't take him to Burger King afterwards, like they did when Dylan Roof, that other racist asshole, murdered 9 Black people during Bible study and worship at their church. Even though a year has passed since my mom was killed, there are days when I still can't mentally wrap my head around the fact that she's gone. I find myself some days just staring aimlessly at her driver's license, credit cards, and social security card, tearing up and hoping she'll call me. I still have her listed on my phone as my medical emergency contact in case something happens to me. When I have family problems with her siblings or my sister, I send her a playful but emotional message, hoping she'll respond and take care of everything. Unfortunately, I have yet to get a response I desperately need. Then there are other days when my heart hurts so much because I know I'm never going to see her again. Days when I spend hours reading and rereading old messages we sent to each other. Days when I wish I could pay her cell phone bill, hoping she'll pick up if I call her so I can hear her country accent just one more time. And days when I'm so angry at her for going to Tops instead of a bodega, a Family Dollar, a Dollar General, or whatever, to get some deli meat. Sometimes when I'm lying awake in bed minutes after waking up, missing my mother and feeling an emptiness inside, I find myself thinking about the song Kanye West, the old Kanye, performed in Paris 1 week after his mother died. In the song, Hey Mama, Kanye sang, "Last night I saw you in my dreams. Now I can't wait to go to sleep." Ever since the day my mother died, sleeping has been one of the best parts of my reality because when I sleep, I dream. When I dream, she's not dead, she's alive. So for me, sleep represents little slices of life because it's the portal to my dreams, a place where my mom still exists, and I'm free to feel all the emotions hidden deep inside me. I rarely feel these emotions when I'm awake, not only due to my introverted nature, but also because I show behaviors that are characteristic of Asperger's syndrome, I'm told. This combination makes it almost impossible for the emotions I feel on the inside to match the emotions, or lack thereof, displayed on the outside. And when you add the dark humor that I now realize I've been using to cope with my mom's unexpected death, some people think that I just don't care about her or have a lack of empathy. On social media, I've had people message me saying, "You're glad your mother is dead," or comment on posts I make saying, "I don't think he even loved his mother." Someone even made a comment saying that he's trying to profit off the death of his mother after I announced that I was writing a book. I've spent many hours over the last year retracing my steps on May 14th, from the time I awoke to the time my mother was killed, and wondering if there was something I could have done to change her fate. Maybe there was some cosmic sign I should have seen or some divine message I may have missed. But there is one thing I know for sure. If I had known on the morning of May 14th, 2022, that by 2:28 p.m. my mother would be dead, I would have done things so differently that day. I would have stopped by her house and told her how much I love her. I would have thanked her for raising me as a single parent. I would have hugged her tight and apologized for being such a bullheaded kid growing up. And most importantly, I would have slashed the tires on her car to keep her home that day, or waited for her killer at the store and used my Rambo knife, as I call it, to slice and dice his face so bad no one would question the reason for a closed casket at his funeral. But the universe had other plans that day. So, Mark, powerful, absolutely powerful. And every time I read that introduction, man, it hits me hard. And so I want to thank you for allowing me to read that to our audience today. There were 275 people who registered for today's event. And now I'm going to go off camera. And I know you're pressed for time because you do have an event in 30 minutes. And I'm going to turn this over to you, okay? Starting with, I believe, chapter 2. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. It's all yours.
All right, chapter 2, Mama Said by Lucas Graham. Moving back to Buffalo after my dad abandoned us was the best decision for my mother because she was extremely extroverted individual who valued family above all else. With most of her siblings living in Buffalo, there wasn't time for her to be depressed between working a full-time job, taking care of me, and spending every ounce of free time she had with her siblings along with their children. My mom considered herself to be a Baptist Christian. Even though she never went to church, she was definitely a woman of faith. And since one of my uncles had become a pastor while we were living in Florida and had started his own church, my mom told him that we would at least attend for 3 weeks to show our support. At the end of the church service on the third week, my uncle and members of our family came to our house. While the women went to be in the kitchen and help my mother cook food, the men stayed in the living room. So, Mark, my uncle said, grinning from ear to ear, what did you think of our church service? Well, I think your church service is part BS and part magical nonsense. What? My uncle exclaimed, looking at me like I had just farted. Hush up, Mark, my mother yelled from the kitchen. Although it did my heart good to see my mom enjoying herself while spending time with our relatives, I started feeling like the black sheep of our family and really didn't feel like I belonged around them. It wasn't because I didn't love them, I think, but mainly because of two things: an age gap that made it impossible for me to get close to any of them, and the fact that I'm just not that much of a family person. The age gap for family members who were younger than me was at least 4 to 7 years, and teenage me wasn't trying to get close to them. The gap for family members who were older than me was big, but because they were old souls like my mother, and with a mental age gap that was much bigger, I really couldn't relate to them, and vice versa. My mother knew I wasn't really close to anyone in my family besides her. And although she tried to help me see the value in close family ties, she didn't really hold it against me. In fact, she would help me sometimes remain incognito. I'll never forget the day we were talking in the kitchen as she stirred the ingredients for a cheesecake she was making from scratch. Suddenly, the house phone rang and she immediately answered it on speaker. Hello? Hey, Auntie Jerry, it's Darius. Is little Mark there? My eyes got as big as bagels. Not only did I hate being called Little Mark, but I absolutely didn't want to talk to him. Before I knew it, I was rapidly shaking my head and mouthing the word no. I'm sorry, baby, my mom fibbed. He's not home right now. After hanging up, my mom gave me the who are you and what have you done with my double scoop of dark chocolate look. Mark, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. If you let them into your heart, you'll start seeing that you have a family, and it's a real blessing. Sure, if you think constant drama, arguments, and dysfunction are a blessing, I replied sarcastically. You know, blood is thicker than water, she said. Well, oil is thicker than both, so I should start calling the tires on your car my family as well. You think you're real smart, don't you? You ain't cute. We both began to laugh, and she never tried to force the issue. She loved me unconditionally and accepted me for what I was and who I had become. But because my mother knew that I wasn't a family person, and she was the biggest family person who ever lived with the biggest blabber mouth, she felt comfortable sharing all the family secrets with me, including the people in our family that she loved and the people she loved but really didn't like. By the time I turned 14 years old, I had become more introverted and not only disliked being around my regular family, but also disliked being around people in general. So my mom enrolled me in Canisius High School during my sophomore year to help me deepen my understanding of God and to get me away from the bad crowd I started hanging around with during my freshman year at another high school. To be clear, the only reason I started hanging around with them was because I wasn't being challenged academically enough. And you know what they say, an idle mind is the devil's playground. When I look back, I really regret the wrong decisions I made at such a young age during my freshman year of high school, because transferring from a predominantly urban black high school to Canisius was a shock to my system. Canisius High School was an all boys Catholic school with a population that I swear was 99% white. There had to be less than 10 black students in the entire school, and I was not one of them. But shortly after I started attending, I began sharing a locker with Mitch, a dark skinned brother like me who had a curly fro and dimples for days. Knowing that there were two of the very few black people here, and we both came from the east side, it immediately gave us an instant connection. As the year progressed, he became my brother from another mother and was the only person besides my mom that I really enjoyed being around. When I introduced him to my mom, she instantly loved him and was so happy that I met a friend that I could relate to and who could relate to me. Now, I can't remember who it was, but one of us kept a bottle of hot sauce in our locker to spice up our lunches. But one day when we were standing at our locker talking, Mitch opened the door and the bottle of hot sauce fell to the ground, breaking the glass and splashing hot sauce everywhere. Suddenly, every white person within a 20-foot radius was staring at us as we stood in a puddle of hot sauce. At the time, I felt an immediate sense of humiliation. I'm in this all white school perpetuating the false notion that all black people have hot sauce with them. In hindsight, it was quite humorous, and even to this day, we jokingly believe that the hot sauce belonged to the other person. So, since this is my book, I'm stating for the last time, it was not my bottle of hot sauce, but it was his. Mitch and I were best friends all through high school and had a lot in common when it came to things like playing sports and video games. But when it came to our taste in women, we were light years apart. In spring of 2007, about a month before graduating from high school, Mitch and I were talking on the phone when his other line rang. Hold on, he said. Let me see who this is. He clicked over to answer the other line as I waited patiently. 2 minutes later, he returned. My boy, this girl on the other line, she's bad. She'll make you want to risk it all. I rolled my eyes. Negro, please. If she's all that, why aren't you talking to her? Hey, bro, don't worry. But what I'm doing over here, I already got a little something I'm working on. Besides, have I ever steered you wrong? I immediately responded, yes. Remember the last girl you said was all of that? The one whose thighs and calves connected? What was her name? Yes, No Knees Brenda. Talking about she was Cambridge Avenue's finest. Nah, man, it's not like that, Mitch insisted as he laughed. Me and Melanie were just friends, but she's fine. You remember the movie Friday, right? Miss Parker definitely ain't got nothing on her. You want to meet her? After going back and forth a few more times, I conceded. Seconds later, I was a silent listener on a three-way call, and Melanie had no idea. Initially, I wasn't going to say a word. I didn't want to waste her time or mine. But as I listened to her speaking, her voice got to me. Before I knew it, my heart was pounding in my chest, and I definitely wanted to meet her. I wasn't worried about her liking me because even though I was weird, introverted, and whatever else you want to say, I knew one thing and one thing for sure. At age 17, I was fine, if I do say so myself. I was 6'6", 250 pounds of double scoop of dark chocolate with game. Let me put it this way. If Tyson Beckford and I walked into a room together, you wouldn't know who's who. Now, if y'all thought I wasn't going to gas up myself in my own book, you must have lost your mind. And for all y'all watching, y'all can see it right here. Under normal conditions, I would have said something smooth to make my presence known and definitely try to pique Melanie's interest. But my heart was still pounding and I couldn't concentrate. So I did the only thing I could think of at that moment. I started barking. barking like a big, big dog. At first, Melanie ignored me and she continued talking to Mitch, so I barked harder and louder to get her attention. Suddenly, my bedroom door swung open. Mark, my mom yelled, standing in the doorway with a rolling pin in her hand. Are you insane? What's wrong with you? Melanie immediately started laughing as I covered the phone. Go away, Mom, I whispered. I got this girl on the phone. When I returned to the phone call, Melanie was still laughing, and I thought all hope was lost. But when Mitch introduced us and she thought my barking was cute, we agreed to meet in person. She said she would bring her younger sister, Trisha, in case I turned out to be a barking lunatic. We both had a good laugh and met at a McDonald's a few hours later. When I saw her standing at the entrance with reddish brown braids, caramel colored skin, and curves for days, and she saw me standing a foot taller than her, looking all dark chocolatey, it was love. Love at first sight, and the sparks definitely flew. A few hours later, we were officially dating. Over the next month, the bond between me and Melanie grew, and I wanted my mom to meet her. She was quickly becoming another woman that I needed in my life, and I knew if she would get along with my mom immediately. The next day, I invited Melanie to our house for dinner. From the time she arrived until the time she left, my mom and Melanie were like two extroverted peas in a pod who talked, and talked some more, and talked the whole time. And I'll be honest, I loved it because really, them talking to each other meant I didn't have to talk at all. Plus, I enjoyed listening to my mom trying to say Melanie's name with her Alabama accent. She never could say it right and always ended up pronouncing Melanie but saying it without the L, so it sounded like meanie. Rosh and I continued dating. My apologies, Melanie and I continued dating after we graduated from high school, but ended our relationship amicably in August 2007 before we both went off to college. She got accepted to Howard University in Washington, D.C. I got accepted to Wayne State University in Detroit. I was excited about going off to college and was even more excited to earn my bachelor's degree and make my mother proud. Mark, I want you to work hard, get good grades, and earn your degree, my mom said after we packed my last duffel bag. I know this is your first time living away from home, but please don't get distracted. Don't worry, Mom, I got this. Before you know it, I'll have my degree. My mom gave me a kiss on the cheek. I know you do. You know I love you. I smiled. Thank you, Mom, I replied. I won't let you down. Afterwards, she took me to the bus station, and 4 hours later, I was in Detroit, Michigan, Motown. After getting checked to my dorm, I started to roam on campus at Wayne State. Now, my intentions at first were definitely honorable when I left home and headed for college. At the same time, you have to understand I was 18 years old, away from home for the first time ever in a city like downtown Detroit. No matter how hard I would try to stick to my morals and stay focused in school, I just couldn't. Not only was I living in a co ed dorm with some of the finest women I've ever seen, I also had a male roommate who was a complete party animal. And when we became best friends, before I knew it, I was a party animal too. During my first semester at Wayne State, my roommate and I partied like rock stars. I didn't have a single shot at staying focused from the start. Hell, the very first night, a girl in the room next to us ran out of her room topless, screaming, shots, shots, shots. She screamed with a bottle of Mr. Boston in her hand. If you never had Mr. Boston vodka, please don't go try it. And of course, you automatically know I definitely took those shots. That's how the semester started, and every day afterwards, my roommate and I played video games, went to the gym, played basketball, football, drank a ton of alcohol, and even though we were underage, we smoked a ton of weed and even did shrooms together instead of studying and doing homework. I couldn't believe how easy it was to get people over 21 years of age to buy alcohol for us. The whole semester, we partied every day, went out all the time, had daily drinking contests, flirted with college women and older women, and I absolutely loved every second of it. Being in Detroit, I've never felt so free and relaxed in my life. Due to all of this partying and drinking all the time, I eventually had to drop out of college at the end of that first semester because As you can probably guess, my grades were horrible. I can't begin to tell you how disappointed my mom was when I returned to Buffalo and had to move back in with her. But I can tell you that the disappointment she felt at that moment was nothing compared to the disappointment she felt over the next 2 years as I kept returning to Detroit just to party instead of trying to do something with my life. Eventually, I started dating a young woman in Detroit who was a student at Wayne. We became friends during my first semester there, and when we started dating, she allowed me to secretly live in her dorm room even though she had a female roommate. On days when my girlfriend was in class, I hid in her room while a roommate was there. Looking back, I really wish I could apologize to the roommate because no, I can't imagine how she must have felt having this big man there alone with her. Granted, I never even came out the bedroom and had no ill intentions with her whatsoever, but she didn't know that at the time. So, by any chance, if you're happen to read in this book, or if you happen to be on in the comment section right now, I offer you my sincerest apologies. You were put in a position you never should have been in. Back to the story though. I was in my early 20s, had a free place to stay but no responsibilities, and was living in a city that I loved drinking and partying my life away and emailing my mother every 2 weeks, asking her to send me money. Eventually, I got an interview as a job door-to-door lawnmower salesman, and I emailed my mom to share the good news. A few minutes later, I received her reply. Mark, I've done everything I can to be a good mother to you and to put you on a path to success. You say you had everything figured out, but you didn't. The only reason you're barely making it in Detroit is because you're using me as your personal ATM, asking for $200 every other week. All the money I paid for you to go to Canisius, only for you to be happy as a door-to-door lawnmower salesman. I am so disappointed in you, son. When I read my mom's email, on the inside it tore me up bad, but on the outside, nothing. No visible signs of sadness. Knowing how bad I was letting my mom down and having her express it to me was all I needed, though, to make this change. In October of 2010, I returned to Buffalo, moved back in with my mother, and renewed my driver's license. And when I discovered a week later that Melanie had returned to Buffalo too after Howard University became unaffordable, I was ecstatic. A few days later, we reconnected, and it was love at first sight all over again. In 2012, I enrolled at Buffalo State University, now Buffalo State College. I was more determined ever to make something out of my life, and I was willing to be committed to it as possible to earn my degree. After working hard during the first 2 years and staying focused, I was well on my way to accomplishing my goal. If only, however, I had known that a major obstacle would appear and threaten to not only derail my education, but also my life. Chapter 3, Life's a Bitch by Nas. And in case you don't know, these are song titles as names for the chapters. When I started attending Buffalo State University, I began having random seizures out of nowhere and was diagnosed with epilepsy, specifically partial complex seizures. And with these type of seizures, I would have one seizure, but they would be in groups or clusters. At first, the seizures didn't affect my ability to go to class, complete my homework, or work part-time. Eventually, however, they became more disruptive and impacted my ability to work and even attend class. Even with the medication I was taking, which forced me to stop working so that I could focus on my schooling, it was still somewhat even more difficult to operate on a day-to-day function. Although my mother was worried, she was still optimistic. In addition to impacting my ability to work and attend class, the seizures also impacted my ability to drive a vehicle. This was particularly frustrating because I had just renewed my driver's license. Now I could no longer drive a car because the risk of having a seizure while driving was too high. Despite these obstacles, however, that were put in my path, I ended up graduating from Buffalo State in 2015 with a double bachelor's degree in urban planning and financial economics. I will always remember walking across the stage and seeing a smile on my mother's face, knowing that she was proud of me. In that moment, I was on top of the world and my future was looking bright. Even though I felt like I was on top of the world, physically, I was struggling because the seizures I was having were becoming more and more frequent. Despite this, I managed to secure a job at a Fortune 500 company. With Melanie earning a good salary as a nurse and me having landed a good job at 25, I knew it was time for me to finally leave my mama's nest. The first month living with Melanie in our new apartment felt like a dream come true as we kept up with paying our rent and utilities. I mean, bragging about paying rent and utilities isn't always appropriate, but it was a great feeling to be able to pay for things on my own and not having to rely on my mother to pay for things like I did when I lived with her. I finally felt like a real adult, and I was especially proud to have achieved this milestone as a young black man. Having my degree, a job, a good woman, and my own place felt like my dreams were finally becoming reality, and I was finally becoming the man my mother always knew I could be, instead of the person I was in Detroit. As previously mentioned, my seizures started becoming increasingly disruptive over time. After a while, I began having seizures about every 10 to 14 days, with these usually involving multiple cluster seizures. Following each seizure, I would need to take a couple of weeks off from work to rest and recuperate. But because they were happening so often, it didn't take long for companies to get tired of paying me a salary to stay home for 2 weeks due to me having epilepsy. One thing you should know about me is the emotions I feel on the inside are rarely expressed physically, but this wasn't the case when it came to anger. When I'm angry, the intense emotions that I feel are visible to everyone around me, as the people I work with soon discovered. I remember the day vividly. 4 months had passed since the day I began working at this Fortune 500 company, and during this time I had 4 seizures. The next day, I arrived at my desk to start my 9 a.m. shift as usual, but when I logged into my computer and opened it up in an email, I saw an email from Human Resources requesting that I come to their office. Once I get there, they asked me to take a seat, and a few minutes later, 3 people arrived. Without sugarcoating anything, they said I was being terminated for violating the attendance policy. I attempted to explain that the missed days were due to my epilepsy and that I had a doctor's note to prove it, but they really didn't care. As you can imagine, I was furious. After using some of the colorful language I had learned from my mother when she was trying to whoop me at age 12 and throwing what some described as an adult temper tantrum, I sat outside in a state of shock and waited for the bus to come so I could go home. When I got home, I was full of so much anger that I walked into the apartment and immediately started punching the wall. "It's going to be okay," Melanie said, trying to comfort me. "How is it going to be okay, Melanie? It doesn't matter how hard I work. As soon as the seizures start, I'm out of a job." "I know it hurts," she calmly said, "but I know you, and I know you're a lot stronger than this. You will get another job just like you got this one." I pulled Melanie close to me and held her tight. "You're right. I am stronger than this, and it's time for me to man up." Over the next few years, I applied for jobs, went on interviews, and explained to employers that I have epilepsy, and I would either get hired but didn't get fired due to missed time or not get hired at all. Even with 2 bachelor degrees, I was still considered overqualified for an entry-level position. I remember the time I was let go that hurt the most. I believe this was in 2017, and I was working for a temp agency that had placed me in a financial institution. This had the potential to hire me for a full-time basis. By this time, medical marijuana had been legalized in the state of New York, which meant that employers couldn't fire you for testing positive. However, since the financial institution I was working with dealt with federal matters, it was up to their discretion. 7 months had passed since the day I began working for this financial institution through the temp agency when a full-time permanent position finally became open. Management there encouraged me to apply for it. I applied for this position and during the interview process informed the interviewers that I had epilepsy, had been prescribed medical marijuana, and would test positive if given a drug test. At the time, I was assured by the vice president of the department that this wouldn't be a problem and I would still be hired. On what was supposed to be my official first day working for them instead of the temp agency, I was once again called into a meeting with HR. along with the same vice president who assured me it was something just to do with paperwork. Looks like we were both wrong. When I arrived, an HR representative introduced herself to me, and I noticed the vice president's eyes were glossy, as if he had just been crying. Moments later, the position in which I was offered was rescinded because I tested positive for medical marijuana and was fired effective immediately. At that point, I just felt tired, numb, and emotionless and wanted to go home. As I was leaving the office, the vice president called out my name and begged me to stop. He was crying and apologizing profusely, stating that he had been fighting for me to keep my job, but HR and the institution wouldn't allow it. I'll be honest, I really didn't care whether he had been fighting for me or against me. I just felt numb and felt no empathy or sympathy for him or the company. Without saying a word, I walked out the door to catch the bus home and just felt like a hamster running on a hamster wheel, getting nowhere fast. Once home, I found myself instantly becoming depressed and thinking dangerous thoughts. My degrees are worthless. My life is worthless. Maybe I should just kill myself and call it a wrap. Over the next 2 weeks, I continued spiraling downward and having these dark thoughts about the various ways I could just end this tormented thing called life. Maybe I should just overdose on my epilepsy medication or jump in front of an oncoming train. Maybe I should just sleep into Niagara Falls or from the top of a building downtown. And even though I knew I would never commit suicide, it gave me little comfort thinking about it. I never told my mother or Melanie this. I didn't feel like worrying with them with these dark thoughts that I was having. I didn't want to scare them or make them feel worried enough about me more than they already are. Because I couldn't succeed in a career based on my field of study, I started working dead-end jobs after dead-end jobs over the next several years. And as if that wasn't bad enough, watching Melanie advance in her career and assume responsibility for more than 80% of our bills definitely added insult to injury. Don't get me wrong, however, I wanted her to succeed, but I didn't feel worthy of being a man. I felt like I was having another woman take care of me once again since I couldn't take care of myself. It was also hard watching my friends and peers earning double, if not triple, the amount of money I was making while they were advancing in their careers, while I was still stuck with no hope of advancing in mine. But I decided not to sulk about it and just began to accept my fate and make the most out of the hand I was dealt. Fortunately for me, through God's grace, the right medication or whatever, at the end of 2018, my epilepsy just went away. And once that happened, the next few years of my life were amazing. In 2020, Melanie and I said our I do's at the courthouse and officially became husband and wife. I got off the hamster wheel and started working at Erie County Medical Center as a patient access service representative. And even though it wasn't my ideal job, I worked hard and did my best. My hard work paid off in November of 21 when I got a promotion and became a public safety assistant. Words can describe how great it felt to finally earn enough money to contribute to our household financially. More importantly, I felt as if I had a new career and my future was looking brighter than ever. Over the next year and a half, Melly and I spent a lot of time doing couple things with my mom and her new boyfriend, Malcolm. I love Malcolm. We got along perfectly. We were both very low-key people, but most importantly, Malcolm was a hard worker. He worked 2 jobs and over 60 hours a week. And after watching my mom go from one trashy boyfriend reeking of alcohol to another trashy boyfriend who couldn't keep a job to save his life, it felt great seeing her with someone who was worthy of her and everything she had to offer. As 2021 came to an end, I was confident that 2022 was going to be the best year yet for me on a career level, and Melanie as well, since she was now becoming a nurse practitioner. But in the middle of March, Melanie began struggling to stay awake while she worked her shift. She had never experienced that level of fatigue before and assumed it was just due to a lack of water. But when she missed her period a few days later, she suspected it was something else and secretly took an at-home pregnancy test as I was playing video games in the living room. Tally, come here, she yelled. I put down my controller and walked into the bathroom. What's up? Melanie was smiling so big I could barely see her eyes. We're having a baby, Tally, she said, showing me the double lines on the pregnancy test. Well, I guess it's about time for me to stop buying video games, I joked. When Melanie told me she was pregnant, on the inside, I was excited about being a father, but on the outside, still nothing. No visible signs of excitement. I'm so happy, baby, Melanie replied as tears of joy filled her eyes. Can you believe it? We're going to be parents. I hugged her tightly. Time to stop all this crying now and man up, I joked. On March 12th, we called my mother to speak to her to share the good news. Mom, I calmly said, Melanie is pregnant. Are you serious? She asked with her country accent sounding even stronger. You know how much I want a grandchild. Are you serious? I'm serious, I kept telling her as I'm laughing and joking over the phone with her. Don't get me excited for nothing, Mark. You know I want to be a grandma. Are you really serious? I'm not going to keep saying this now, I chuckled. Melanie, she called out once again, somewhat mispronouncing her name. Is he joking? You know he's a jokester. He's not joking, Mama G. I'm really pregnant. The next thing I knew, my mom was screaming at the top of her lungs. I could hear the excitement in her voice. We're having a baby, she cried out. Oh, thank you, Lord, we're having a baby. For the next 8 weeks, my mom was happier than I've ever seen, and she was exhibiting typical grandparent behavior. Buying things for the baby, calling to check on Melanie regularly, and telling everyone she knew she was going to be her first time grandma. But on the morning of May 7th, one day before Mother's Day, the happiness that Melanie and I had been feeling over the last 8 weeks abruptly came to an end when she woke up and saw blood in her underwear and in the toilet and realized that she had had a miscarriage. Prior to this, we had made plans to visit both our mothers on Mother's Day, but now Melanie was too distraught to celebrate, especially since she was no longer going to be a mother herself. And because we didn't want the loss of our baby to overshadow our mother's special holiday, we decided to postpone telling them for a week and decided we would just visit each of our mothers once we get off work on May 14th. Unfortunately, if only I had known that Melanie and I would never have a chance to tell my mom that we lost the baby.
Every time I think about that particular moment, it also hits me hard. So the tragedy at Tops occurred 1 week after Raj or Melanie miscarried. And you never got to tell your mom that she wasn't going to be a grandma. And so when I look back at that moment, how were you feeling? You didn't know at the time that the tragedy was going to occur a week later. And so, do you regret not telling your mom on May 7th that you had lost the baby? Do you have any regrets there? Or how do you feel about that moment?
I mean, looking back now, in hindsight, I definitely wish I would have, but unfortunately, as they say in football, it's hard to, you really can't play, Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, for those of you that are watching, we've got about 6 minutes before Mark has to leave. If there are any questions that you have for him, let me just look in the chat. I know there's a lot of comments. And so, Mark, let me just share some of the comments that I'm seeing on the chat. Anthony said, I'm still trying to understand why the police didn't shoot him, but they're so quick to shoot unarmed Black men because, and I quote, I was scared for my life or he posed a threat. Here is a man armed to the teeth and wearing body armor clothing, going around shooting innocent, unarmed people. And I mean, he shot more than 10 Black people, 10 African Americans. So, how come not one shot was fired by the police at this racist coward? The system is corrupted and twisted. And that is again from Anthony. Do you have any comments that you would like to make to respond to Anthony's chat? Oh, can you hear me, Mark? Oh, let's see. Mark,
Yeah,
can
I
you still
can't hear you if you can hear me.
Okay, I can hear you, but I'm not sure why you can't hear me. Let me something. Okay, can you hear me now? Mark, I don't know what happened. Let's see. Okay. Can anyone else hear me still? Mark says he can't hear me.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't hear you.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, Mark, can you hear me now? Still nothing? Wow. Guys, I am so sorry. I don't know. It says, so the audience is saying that they can hear me. So let me put this up here.
No, here, let me leave and enter right quick.
Okay. Okay, guys. So I know that you can still hear me. We're going to see if we can get Mark's sound back. Okay. So Mark is coming back in.
All right, there we go. I can hear you now.
Oh, perfect. I was saying, oh, no, not right now. I know you have to go. So were you able to hear the comment that Anthony wrote and give a response to that? Or do you need me to read it since you couldn't hear me?
Anthony, why they didn't shoot him?
Yeah, that's what he was wondering. Do you have any thoughts about that particular question?
I'll say it's probably due to systemic racism. I mean, America, society has been trained to believe that a Black man is the most dangerous enemy, the most dangerous threat to one's life. When in actuality, it's a young white male, a young white man.
Yeah.
And the police that day, they were the same color as him arresting him, and they for some reason didn't feel threatened with him holding this weapon, but they easily feel threatened if they see a Black man who falls asleep in a McDonald's drive-through,
Right.
or a Black man who enters his own house, or a Black person sleeping on a couch at a library, or they even feel threatened when they do a raid in the wrong Black person's house.
Right.
This seems like they've been
there's
trained, indoctrinated to be afraid of someone who's Black.
Yeah. I always say there's two criminal justice systems. All right, Mark, let's see what else we have. So Kiana said, I'm from Buffalo and grew up around the corner from the store. Terrible. Okay, Belinda said, such a horrible, horrible tragedy. Jack said, such a sad story. It brings tears to my eyes. I think I'm seeing a pattern here from the part where you were putting your Mac Daddy on, trying to impress this girl on the phone. And you started barking like a dog because that was all you could think of to do. Everybody laughed. That was funny. Okay, Sasha said, let's see, this is my hometown and I lived down the street from the store. It was a safer place to live back then. I was horrified to hear about this. Okay, and then we have, okay, excellent. So Mark, I know you're pressed for time. I want to thank you for giving us your hour this morning. I want to thank you for reading your story. Can you tell our audience really quick if they want to buy your book, know more about what happened, read the book, where they can get it from?
Oh, no problem. You're available to purchase The Day the Devil Came 514. The Day the Devil Came to Buffalo. It's available on Amazon right now. Also, if you would like to donate to my organization, Agents for Advocacy, you can through Cash App, Social Change 89. You can via Zelle with my phone number, 716-510-3228, or through PayPal. Once again, just Agents for Advocacy.
And Agents for Advocacy is the organization that you started. So you're actually giving back to the Buffalo community in many, many different ways. And, can you just tell us a little more about the work that you've been doing since this tragedy and how you've been keeping your mom's memory alive through Agents for Advocacy?
Yeah, we do a lot of numerous food drives, clothing drives, for either those who are homeless or those suffering from income inequality or food equity problems. We host a lot of business, financial, and entrepreneurship classes. Our main goal and focus is to try to tell people, nobody's coming to save us or rescue us. Unfortunately, it starts with ourselves. So we all have to work together in some type of group economics, collaborative form, so we can all dig ourselves out of the situations in which we are in. Because what we definitely learned through COVID, the people with the money isn't going to give money, to the people at the bottom. COVID was a great time for people who was already rich because they became even a lot more richer. Unfortunately, it was already for people who were struggling, it became even more of a struggle. And since we've seen through inflation what happened after COVID, it's becoming even harder. The average Thanksgiving meal now is it costs up close to the 18 to 23% more than it did before COVID started.
Absolutely. So, Mark, I want to thank you again. So, one more time, his book is 514, The Day the Devil Came to Buffalo. You can purchase this book to support Mark and his efforts on Amazon. You can search for Mark Talley, Mark, M-A-R-K, Talley, Talley. Or if you search for my name, you will find his book, because he listed me on Amazon as having written the foreword. So if you search for me, you're going to find Mark. And I just want to thank you all. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Dr. Joyce. Thank you, everyone who showed up today. Thank you to all those who will watch the replay afterwards. And thank you, Delilah, for working in the background and monitoring the chats. Okay, sending everyone much love, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day, Jackie.
Thank you.